of water for the most part. Water came out of the early days of Montana, and the laws that we have regarding water came from the mining camps and the irrigation areas, where it was all about appropriating water, taking it out of the stream and putting it in a place where you could put it to beneficial use as the law requires. And so that meant we were going to sprinkle fields or flood irrigate in the early days. We were going to move that water to mining camps where it could be used for hydraulic mining or whatever it might be. But today, as we've moved to Big Sky country, it's the person who's fishing that stream who suggests that maybe that water should be left in there for fish habitat, for providing the aquatic insects that those fish live on. And so once again, we have this real tension between whose water, whose elk, whose land, and we could go on with the number of whose is it and how do we resolve it. To be sure, when the Constitution was rewritten and we added that the citizens of Montana had a right to a clean and healthful environment, I think it was part of that transition boiling up from the bottom with people saying, we have new demands on the resources of Montana, and they aren't just timber for 2x4s. They aren't just grass for cows. It isn't just water for irrigation. But the environment became a much more important thing as we moved into the 1970s, when we had the first Earth Day, and so on. But we didn't ask the question, and of course when we write constitutions and even when some of you write laws, we don't ask the important questions that have to come along with this idea of we all have a right to, you fill in the blank. Who will provide this clean and healthful environment? What will it cost? And who's going to get it? Those are questions that are crucial if we're going to understand just how we're going to fulfill the demands we now have as we all wear our environmentalist hat. Take stream access, and this one is about as contentious as any. In the early 1980s, as you know if you know anything about the history of this debate, there was some called into question just who had a right to control access to water. Montana followed the lead of California in applying a little known to that point legal doctrine called the public trust doctrine. Let me just digress for one moment to the California case, because it's crucial, I think, to really understanding what property rights can do for the environment. The California case involved Mono Lake, a lake which was being dewatered because Los Angeles had prior appropriation water rights to that lake and could draw those water rights out of the watershed into the aqueducts that fed Los Angeles. As Mono Lake was drawn down, salt content went up. It affected the entire ecosystem of the lake, and the environmental community, led largely by the Audubon Society and Environmental Defense Fund, said, we're going to sue the state for allowing a private group, and admittedly it was a municipal group, but allowing somebody to have private rights to water that would diminish the public's value in Mono Lake. They filed suit. They won suit. I believe the case was settled in 1983, and the court said, you're right. The state of California cannot allow its environment to be degraded by such things as diversion rights. The public trust is at stake. Remember, 1983. The first trickle of water to go back into Mono Lake started in 1998. Here's this huge period of time between when the court said, you can't do this, you've got to protect the public interest in Mono Lake, and when water actually flowed. I know one of the attorneys who was involved with the Environmental Defense Fund in that case, and he has told me in no uncertain terms was the biggest mistake of his and he believed the environmental community's life when they took this legal approach. He said if we wanted to get water in Mono Lake, we should have used the market. We should have bought it from Los Angeles and left it in the lake. And we could have done that with far less acrimony, with far better results. Well, Montana followed that public trust doctrine and said, we're going to allow people access to the water because it's held in public trust. Again, gives us all a right to our clean and healthful environment. But it brings a lot of controversy with it, and I won't dwell on these. You know them well, the bridges of Madison County, Mitchell Slough, and many others that are likely to come as we continue to debate this issue. In all these cases, basically, what we're doing is saying we believe as a public we have a right to something. It's provided by somebody. Some of you may think it's just God provided these streams, but somebody takes care of these streams. In the case of the Mitchell Slough, it wasn't a stream to begin with. It only became trout habitat once some people, yes, they're wealthy out-of-staters, put a huge amount of money into making this a body of water, a stream of water that would harbor trout. Well, it wasn't something that just existed. It had to be produced. It had to be provided. And yet we want now to have it for free. Recently, you may have heard that there is a proposal for a Montana Public Access Trust Fund. On the one hand, when I read the title, I thought, well, this isn't necessarily so bad. We'll put some money together in a trust fund. We'll use it to provide access. Funding sources, I love the one, the general revenue. Right. Or tax oil and gas development. And the list goes on. But look and search hard to find a statement that says, we're going to raise Terry Anderson's whopping $85, I think it cost me for my sportsman's license, by, let's say, $10 more to pay for access. No, indeed, all of our access funds, I shouldn't say all, most of our access funds come from raising license fees to out-of-state hunters, and that's always wonderful. Don't tax, you want always tax the people who are out of state if you can. But the point here is, it isn't very transparent. It doesn't link that demand and supply in any meaningful way. So, what might we do about it? Well, people like the Molesniks, great friends of ours down in Montana, in Bozeman, who have a ranch, the MZ Ranch, have really made it such that we can have cows, not condos, to use the phrase from the Montana Land Reliance bumper sticker. We have cows, not condos there, and you can stand in the stream where this person is fishing and look across the road to where they're subdividing, and you'll find that the reason the Molesniks are not subdividing is in part, at least, they're making some revenue by producing a beautiful trout stream that costs, yes, $75 a day to fish, but I ask you how much you paid for your lift ticket or your green fees when you last played golf. This is a price that people are paying, and the result is the Molesniks are what I like to call enviropreneur ranchers. They're looking for ways to make the ranch work both economically and environmentally. We're working on a project at PERC called Water as a Crop, trying to get people to think differently about water. It's not just water to irrigate your field or water if we were still mining to operate mining operations. But it's a valuable asset that has lots of different uses. And one of those uses is indeed ecosystem services, if you want to use the term wearing your environmentalist hat. The city of New York has a huge watershed in the Adirondacks, and it either owns, leases, or has easements on those lands, all of which it pays for to maintain the pristine environment necessary to supply New York with water that hardly needs to be treated. They are paying landowners to not do certain things or to do certain things. They're actually owning and controlling the land. They're using the market. It's a very transparent way, and it is making the people of New York pay for the services they want from their environment. Here in Montana, with the House bill that required retirement of some diversion rights to offset groundwater withdrawals, we created a kind of system where people are going to have to face the real costs of development in terms of its impact on water. And I think the great thing to come from that is it is going to force the farmer and rancher who's been sprinkling that field to say, could I do something different in the way I irrigate and sell some of these water rights to the developer who wants to grow houses instead of alfalfa. Now, that may not fit your image of the treasure state, but it helps balance the treasure state with big sky country. If you look around the West, and I believe we have one of these publications on the back table, a publication from PERC entitled Saving Our Streams, what you'll find is there has been a huge increase in the number of purchases of water and dollars spent. The dash line with the dollar signs is dollars spent on buying water for environmental purposes. That is keeping it in the stream to maintain fish habitat or dilute pollution, and the amount of water